Okay, guys, thanks for joining me for another edition of the Law Lounge. Today we'll be covering off the maul, which has been a hotly contested and debated area of law for a long time. So it should be quite interesting. A lot of video today as well to help explain some of the situations that occur. So we'll dive right into it. Cool. So as always, we take our resources mostly from the World Rugby Laws of the Game. Today we're covering off Law 16, with the maul. We have a lot of law application guidelines and clarifications in law for the maul, also available through the Laws of the Game website. So we'll be using those to inform us today as well, and taking examples from those, as well as our definitions of a few key areas. And as always, we have our resources throughout our Bay of Plenty Rugby website. So our laws section is excellent and can be backed up by our education and our intro to rugby refereeing pages as well. So some of the key definitions we'll be using today. So when we refer to the attacking team, that's the opposition to the team whose half is play is taking place. So if you are in the opposition's half, then you are the attacking team, irrespective of whether you have the ball. So beyond, behind, or in front of a position means with both feet, and particularly we were referring to offsides. Binding is the most critical definition we're probably grappling with today. So that's grasping another player's body firmly between the shoulders and the hips, with the whole arm in contact from hand to shoulder. Binding is particularly important not just in the scrum, but also in a maul, where the definition of binding can change what happens in a maul. The defending team is obviously the opposite of the attacking team. So if you are in your half, then you are the defending team. Forward means towards the opposition's dead ball line. Hindmost means the nearest to a team's own goal line. And obstruction is when a player attempting to play is illegally impeded and prevented from doing so. And we'll talk a lot about obstruction today, and when it's penalisable, when it's accidental. But yes, the maul itself is often referred to as legalised obstruction. So we'll get right into the nitty-gritty of it. So the principle of a maul is to allow players to compete for the ball, which is up off the ground. Okay, so the definition of a maul is it's a phase of play that consists of the ball carrier and one player from each team bound together and on their feet. So you've got the ball carrier, plus you have to have at least two more players, one player from each team bound all together. So the minimum you require for a maul is 3 players. So how is a maul formed? Well, so a maul can only take place in the field of play. And as mentioned, the ball is held up by a player off the ground, consists of the ball carrier, at least one player from each team, bound together and on their feet. So that binding is key as well. They must be bound to each other. So once formed, a maul must move towards a goal line. Don't forget the binding is between the hips and the shoulders. So if an opposition player or someone is bound below the hips, then that doesn't constitute binding, and therefore doesn't constitute a maul. So that's an attempted tackle. You can see in those two demonstrations there, while we have an opposition player and a ball carrier, we do not have a maul formed there because there's not a teammate from the ball carrier's team. And same in the other picture to the left, to the right of it as well. Okay, when we're looking at maul setup, so the ball carrier must be available to be defended by their opponents. So right at the start of the maul, they must be able to be defended by their opponents. So they can't have any of their teammates blocking them or from the opponents coming in to tackle them. And long placements to be avoided. So these often lead to obstruction. And all they really do is invite attacking players to join in front of the ball. So again, long placements are penalised usually because of the fact that it does set up obstruction. we'll demonstrate these from some of the videos we have here. So the first video will show the setup of a maul where the ball carrier cannot be defended by the opponent, by the
This is Giles.
oh, so we have, pause it there, we've got maul set up, taken down from the line out, and two of the other line out participants from the ball carrier's team are in front of the ball carrier at the moment. Therefore, white cannot get to the ball carrier and make first contact with them. All right, here we go.
This is Giles.
So we pause it there so we can see that blue's taking the ball in from the line out, and the ball carrier is at the back here. He has two of his teammates in front of him, which means that white cannot go and that means they're obstructing white from reaching the ball carrier.
Finds the big Scottish shot.
This is an illegal setup.
This is Giles.
Here we have a similar setup, but from in the field of play. So here we have ball taken from the line out, from the kickoff, and again two players in front of the player who took the ball, who then obstructed the white team from making contact with the ball carrier before the maul commences. So that's obstruction. Here we have an example of a long placement. So ball taken up, taken in the line out by the jumper, and placed back. So he's passed the ball back to the player at the back. There is no maul formed at this point, as the player has just landed on the ground and there's been no movement towards the goal line. Pass the ball back to the player at the back who is not bound, has received the ball with two hands, and is then bound on to the player in front of him. So by doing this, binding on to, so receiving the ball, there's been no more, and then he's bound onto a player in front of him, and they've started to move forward. So there's an obstruction. He's been obstructed by the players in front of him. So that is obstruction as well. There's a slight difference between that and accidental offside. So the following situations are to be treated as accidental offsides. They are not penalised, and instead a scrum is applied. These usually occur when setting up a maul at the line out. So first scenario is if a team in possession set up a maul. This has been happening quite a bit in the last couple of years. And the ball is transferred back. So ball taken in the line out, and then brought down, and maul is set up at the line out, but no opposition players engage with that setup. So there's been no contact. We don't have a maul yet because of that. By definition, we need to have an opposition player bind on to the ball carrier. So if that team does set up that maul and they transfer the ball back to either to a player in the middle or to the back of that maul setup, then what we do in this case is the referee will call use it, because at the moment, if they're not moving anywhere, there's no real obstruction. We would just want the ball out and to be played. However, if the referee calls use it and there's any forward movement from there, the whistle is blown and scrum is applied for accidental offside, because a ball carrier is then making contact with his own teammate in front of him. There's no maul, so it's not a legal action. Note that in this scenario, the defending team, if it was at a line out, the defending team cannot actually leave the line out. So they can stand where they are, but because the line out is not over, they must remain at the line of touch, at the mark of touch. Second situation is the ripper. So the ripper is the person who pulls the ball at a line out from the line out jumper. So if they are typically they are not bound when receiving the ball, and then they're binding to a player in front afterwards. This is similar to the long placement. So if this occurs, so not the long placement is penalisable. However, if this occurs, if the ripper is not bound,
Modern rugby rarely goes where it's about heart and soul.
You can see here the ripper
Such
is
a
not
large
bound.
percentage now of the playing time that's left in the match.
In front of him.
Toulon, the champions, have 14 men,
into a player in
and
front of himself.
There's been a danger of that happening before with Leinster.
So that's treated as accidental offside. So long placement is treated as intentional. So that's treated as obstruction and penalisable. Whereas a ripper, just ripping the ball back off line out jumper, typically if they are not bound, then they will be accidentally offside. Okay, movement within the maul. So the ball can be moved backwards hand to hand once the maul's formed. The player, the ball carrier, is not allowed to move or slide backwards in the maul. So themselves, they are caught up in the maul and have to be bound to it and remain in their position or leave the maul. And they can, if they want to get rid of the ball, they have to distribute it backwards, so hand to hand. They can't just move themselves backwards out of the maul with the ball in hand. In effect, what that does is it puts their own teammates then around them, in front of them, and the only way to get back through there is to unbind. So, or to have a sliding bind, which we'll talk about later as well. Sliding binds are not legal. You must be bound firmly and must remain in contact. So, ball carriers need to pass the ball back hand to hand through the transfer the ball that way. And the ripper needs to stay in contact with the jumper until they've transferred the ball. And we referred to that in the previous slide as well, where that ripper, if they are unbound or remain out of contact, then it's accidental offside. Here we go. Ball taken down at the line up by Green. And then the ball carrier has slid backwards, is now at the back of the ball. Taken down, sixes rip the ball, remain in contact, that's fine. However, the ball has not been transferred. The ball remained in the grasp of Green player there, and players have moved, his own players have moved around him to form an obstruction and slid to the back of the ball. You can see Green players coming and joining the maul in front of the ball carrier, which is obstruction as well. Something to score a try of it. Offside at the maul. So each team has an offside line, runs parallel to the goal line and through the participant's hindmost foot. And if that foot is on or behind the goal line, the offside line is the goal line itself. So players joining the maul must join from an onside position or retire behind the offside line immediately. So once you are unbound from the maul, then you must get back in behind that offside line. If you leave the maul, you must return behind the offside line. You can then rejoin the maul so long as you're doing from an onside position. Cool. A little bit about maul swimming. Maul swimming is not in the law book, but it's a term that has been referred to over the last few years. So I also talk about players bound in the maul. So a player that's bound in the maul is allowed to be there. If they are caught up in the maul, within the maul itself, they don't have to be bound. Sometimes there's no chance for them to be bound. Okay, so if they're on the outskirts, they need to be bound. But if they are in the maul itself, then they don't need to be bound. They are caught up in the maul. So they are okay. They're moving through the middle. It's players on the outskirts of a maul. They are the ones who must bind firmly and maintain their bind in a similar way that a flanker needs to maintain their bind in a scrum. So a player may unbind or use a sliding bind to go around the maul, or in essence, swim around the maul as we sometimes see.
Rich can play the rest of the season like they played the First quarter of this match. Well, they won't be in the bottom three for long, that's for sure.
Here we see number 5, black. This is just an incorrect entry. So the maul is set up there, and the first place that number 5 joins is around the side. This is a good example of sliding around the side or swimming.
Well, they've given it to the
sliding
stumpier varieties of this.
Here we go, blue, sliding around the outside of the maul.
In comes Dave Atwood there.
And then
the referee's arm
tackling
is
the ball
out.
carrier. So they are not bound. So they are bound initially, and then they've slid around the outside, unbound, and then tackled the ball carrier, so they're offside.
Murray, the veteran.
Another example of a sliding bind.
Now in the hands of Marceau. Marceau is going to pop out in a moment.
So we see a couple of black players peeled off and then retreated, and that was fine. However, there was one that slid around the outside of the maul and then tackled the ball carrier. We see players here we go. We see some players in front of him peel off, and that's fine. But he slid around the outside, unbound, and then tackled the ball carrier. The second he unbinds,
it's hard
he must retire.
Strauss to Cullen.
This is a legal move, so the player has been caught up in the middle of the maul and has come through the middle.
Heaslip does have the ball.
So they're not on the outside. Even though they are not bound, they are caught up in the maul, and that is legal. That is fine. So here we see a white player being pointed to right now. In the middle of the maul, they're caught up in it. They do not have to be bound. They've come through the middle. They are still caught up within the maul, so they can come through the middle of the maul and, in essence, affect that disruption.
First line out of the night. Lynn goes up, takes it well against his former teammates. Lynn.
Players must endeavour to remain on their feet. Number 3,
2007 through 2009.
Pretty simple. More collapsed.
Line out was over. It came back.
Another video we have here.
Duplessis, and it's taken down by the Yagan, and Wales try and get the defensive shove on.
This is a good example of swimming around the outside of the maul. So you can see the maul set up here by green.
Charteris then flings
And
himself
watch
upon
the
it. Dupree.
actions of the red player. Looks like he's trying to do freestyle swimming around the outside of the maul. Again, clearly unbound, which means as soon as he unbinds, he's no longer part of the maul and needs to retire behind the offside line.
It all came from a fling into the face of Gethin Jenkins a long time ago, which
a non-collection of the ball at the kickoff.
mistake on
Go
mistake.
back to where
Duplessis at the back there, shove on, taken down by the.
Okay, so you can see number 4 in the headgear. He's on the outskirts of the maul on the far side.
And Wales try and get the defensive shove
And
on.
he swims around the outside of the
Held in the
maul.
back there by Bismarck
grabs
Duplessis,
it.
and a penalty coming to South Africa as the ball goes to ground.
Because he did not retire behind the offside line. Okay, joining the maul. So players joining the maul must do so from an onside position, as we've talked about. They must bind on to the hindmost player in the maul. So that is their own teammate, and if there's none of their own teammates left in the maul, then they can make contact with the foremost opposition player. If they don't do either of those things, they are subject to penalty. And as with all parts of the game of rugby, the players must have their heads and shoulders no lower than their hips. So it's the same as at a ruck, same as at a scrum. That is a free kick.
Julian Sevier is standing on the touchline once again.
So in this case, we can see initially a good setup, but then there was a secondary setup to the right, which was obstruction. Can't really see it from this side, but this angle here shows a good view. So maul was set up initially at the middle, but here you can see the yellow player at the headgear setting up ready, and then clearly in front of the ball carrier. The ball carrier peels off the back of the original setup and joins onto the back of the player of this other player waiting. So in essence, that yellow player in the headgear is obstructing. So this is obstruction penalty.
Here it comes round the corner, and there's no doubt about it. There's a man.
Yeah. So actions during the maul. Any player in a maul must endeavour to stay on their feet. So it's the responsibility of all players to keep the maul up and to stay on their feet. And as we mentioned before, players may be caught up in the maul, so within the maul itself, or bound to it. So again, if they're on the outskirts, they must be bound. If they're in the middle, they can just be caught up in it, and they do not necessarily need to be bound. But players cannot be alongside it or not have a complete bind. They must retire behind their offside line if that's the case. The only person that can go to ground legally in a maul is the ball carrier. If they do go to ground, they must make the ball available immediately. And immediate there's no wiggle room on that. If the ball is not immediately available, then a scrum is blown, and typically it's the opposition feet. Players must not intentionally collapse a maul or jump on top of it. We saw with number 3 before in the Chiefs video, or attempt to drag an opponent out of the maul. The sanction for both of those is a penalty. The maul collapse is probably one of the more common sanctions that we see with a maul. Players trying to continue to tackle a ball carrier to the ground even after a maul is formed. That player can no longer effect that tackle. They must attempt to keep that maul up and on their feet. Also another one, this particularly relates to halfbacks usually. So no player can take any action to make opponents believe that the maul is ended. So this would apply to, for example, a halfback at the back of a maul, running all of a sudden running one direction, pretending to have the ball in their hands, which could make the opposition think that the maul's over. Again, that's the same as at a ruck or a scrum as well. The truck and trailer. So this is a concept that's been around for a while and been referred to, but understood and only in many different ways. So in essence, a truck and trailer is not about a person being at the back of a maul. It's about the binding. So it's if a player takes a ball in a form maul and detaches the complete bind. So if they're not fully bound and players in front of them are moving forward, the maul is over. So the ball carrier is not bound to the maul. The maul's over. There is no maul anymore because you need to have the ball in there, up off the ground, caught in that maul, and moving towards the goal line. So there's no maul anymore. And so if their teammates continue to move forward as a shield, and that player is not bound fully or not bound at all, then that is obstruction, often known as a truck and trailer.
Very hot and steamy, which will be familiar conditions for the Fijians. Less so Italy.
Ball transfer to the back.
Drive, good momentum here.
And the ball carrier is completely detached from the maul. So we have no maul at this point.
From the Azzurri.
And the players in front of them acting as a shield. So that is obstruction. Truck and trailer. Another example of a truck and trailer.
They're back in their own territory at the moment.
So ball carrier has detached, they're not fully bound, so the maul is over at this point. And then the players in front of them continue moving forward at the barrier. That is a truck and trailer and obstruction. Leaving a maul. So when players of a team who are not in possession of the ball intentionally leave the maul. So a maul's already formed, and then all members of a team who don't have the ball leave the maul intentionally. So the maul So there's no team, so there's no players from their team left in the maul. The maul it still continues, even though there's no players left from that team. By definition, the maul was set up. The maul existed. Those players chose to leave. That team chose to leave. So their team with the ball can continue their actions as a maul. These players, if they want to rejoin, they can, totally fine, so long as they bind onto the frontmost player of the team in possession of the ball. Because by this point, the team in possession may have the ball at the back, and so now have players in front of them. So if the defending team, the opposition team, want to rejoin and get going again and trying to defend it, then they cannot come around and try and tackle the ball carrier. They have to rejoin that maul at the foremost player of the team in possession. So maul's already established by this point. Not a common situation, but in law from where it occurs. Stationary mauls. This is when the maul stops. So if a maul has stopped moving towards a goal line, no, not forwards, not backwards, towards a goal line. So if that happens for more than 5 seconds, but the referee can see the ball being moved, then the referee instructs the players to use the ball. So this is where the maul's come to a complete stop. It's either going sideways or nowhere at all. More than 5 seconds has elapsed, and the referee can see the ball being transferred back through the wall. Then they must use the ball within a reasonable period of time. Other scenario, this is a scenario we see more commonly. So if a maul becomes stationary, and so stops moving towards a goal line, but then restarts within 5 seconds. So if it stops this time, you'll often hear a referee say, use it once or once. If they restart within 5 seconds towards a goal line, the maul can continue. But if it does stop a second time, and the ball is available, or the ball is being moved towards the back, and the referee can see it, the referee instructs the team to use the ball. So the team in possession must use the ball within a reasonable amount of time, usually a few seconds, and then play continues. If they do not use the ball, a scrum is awarded. It's considered to be a turnover at this point. And maul ending successfully. So a maul ends and play continues when the ball or the ball carrier leaves the ball is on the ground, or the ball is on or over the goal line. So as we said earlier, we cannot have a maul, we can only have a maul in the field of play. So we can't have a maul in the end goal areas, because once that ball is on or over the goal line, the maul ends. So if in the field of play, the ball's on the ground, the maul's over. But if players from both sides are on their feet in contact with each other and over the ball, this by definition is a ruck, and then so all ruck laws apply. So for example, if the ball carrier wiggles down, goes to ground within a maul, puts the ball on the ground, lays the ball back, and there's players from both teams on their feet over that ball, then all of a sudden we have a ruck, and ruck law applies. Unsuccessful ending to a maul. So these following situations are an unsuccessful ending to a maul. So when the ball becomes unplayable, so it gets caught up and cannot be played. If the maul collapses, but not as a result of foul play or intentional collapse. If the maul doesn't move towards a goal line for longer than 5 seconds, and the ball doesn't emerge, again, so it stops, doesn't go towards the goal line, referee can't see it being moved. It's an unsuccessful end, so it's effectively unplayable. If the ball carrier goes to ground, it is not immediate, and the ball's not immediately available, as you mentioned earlier. Or if the ball's available to be played, the referee's called used it, and then it's not being played within 5 seconds of the call. So once that call's been made, then the teams must use it within 5 seconds. They cannot restart the maul. They must use the ball. Otherwise, it's a turnover scrum.
Griffin. Last feet. Last. Again, the Irish forwards lining up to have a go.
Here we see a
They
maul
haven't
being
stopped.
formed now.
But it has been an obdurate blue wall that they've run into time and time again in this game. Choke tackle is there for France from Ndiaye and Fulani.
And we see the green player held up, maul's formed, and then the ball carrier.
Again in this game.
Went number 8 was the ball carrier, and they were trying to pull themselves out of the ground, so the ball carrier has gone to ground, and the ball was not immediately available. So in this case, it was an unsuccessful ending by definition of D. Ball carrier goes to ground, ball not immediately available, scrum to the opposition. And lastly, we have a maul from a kick. So we have a slightly different application of law for a maul that forms directly from a kick. So from a kick and play, we have in a maul forms, if that maul ends unsuccessfully, then the scrum does not go to the opposition. It remains, the scrum goes to the ball carrying team. So the team that took the ball into that maul from the kick. The team that gets the scrum. Effectively, this is protection for the ball carrier.
In that match, which they lost, and he's lost that first one.
Kick being put up, blue heading for the ball, takes the ball in, and they are immediately held up by the gold players. The blue player binds on and forms a maul. Here we have a maul, it's moving towards the goal line. The ball carrier wrestles himself to the ground.
Starter this evening after offering what he could off the bench on Saturday.
The ball carrier wrestles himself to the ground, so it wasn't an illegal act. They are more than entitled to do that. He's the only player who can go to ground. The maul has collapsed. We have an unsuccessful end to the maul. The ball is not available to be used. Taken in from a kick. So scrum is awarded to the receiving team. And lastly, we have our NZR game priorities for the community game. At lineouts, our game priority is for the lineout maul to be formed legally, and defenders must be able to make contact with the ball carrier. This comes back a lot to what we were referring to earlier with the ball carrier at the commencement of the maul being at the front and being able to be defended. So should not have any players in front of them before a maul is formed. And at the breakdown, this is to do with halfbacks. So halfbacks are not to be challenged. So we see this sometimes with players who legally come through the middle of a maul, so they're caught up in a maul and bound, and the halfback is behind the maul, but they're not bound to it, so they're not part of it. And sometimes they are grabbed or pulled or obstructed by a player that's come through the middle. So again, that's playing a player without the ball. So the ball is not out and the maul has not ended until the ball has become clear of the bodies that are attached to the maul. It's the same as in a ruck or a scrum. The ball is not out until it's lifted clear from the feet or from the players that have formed that scrum or the ruck. So halfback cannot be played until they've got the ball out. Right, that's all we have for today. Thanks very much for joining us. I see there's no questions in there, so hopefully I've explained things clearly enough. If you do have any questions, make sure you pop them through. Our last week of Law Lounge next week, we'll be covering off the who, what, when, where, and why of the game of rugby, and finishing off with foul play. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.